The rumored affordability and inflation fighting package has been made official because Justin Trudeau just announced it outside of the Liberal caucus retreat just today.
Today, we're announcing additional targeted new measures that will support the middle class and people working hard to join it. These will be the very first pieces of legislation that we introduce when the House returns.
And this plan, if it is to be passed through the House of Commons, will contain 3 different elements that we talked about in a previous video. The first one is a doubling of the GST tax credit that you might be receiving on a monthly basis. The second is a $500 one-time payment to people receiving the Canada Housing Benefit. And the third are direct cash payments for a dental program. Now, we went over all the details on how you can calculate this for yourself to see if you're eligible and if you're going to receive any of these affordability package plans that the Liberal government is laying out. So I'll put a link right here, and if you haven't watched the past video that we did on this, watch that first, but make sure to come back to this video because by the end of this video, you're going to know how likely this plan is to actually happen and when you can expect to actually start seeing that money entering your account. First, I need to give you a little bit of context about why people will actually think that this plan is a bad idea. You see, many people believe that if we spend more money and give more money out to individuals, that actually won't help with affordability and help people that are struggling on the fringes because it has the chance of pushing up inflation and adding to the higher cost of living. Because if you give more money to people, they go out and spend it on things, and then if there's more demand for things, the price goes up, right? Basic supply and demand. That's the argument. And this isn't just a narrative that the Conservatives are concerned about. We actually saw Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister of the Liberal government, talk about this very concern at the beginning of August.
I think that it is very important not to make the problem worse. I am very mindful of the importance of not pouring fiscal fuel on the flames of inflation. And that's why in the budget that I tabled in April, I chose to walk a really fiscally responsible line.
So some were surprised by this announcement that the Liberal government would be spending more money, $4.5 billion in total, and giving this out to individuals. But Trudeau has a response to this because he was actually asked during the press conference, hey, well, how can you be doing this now when you've already said that you don't want to pour inflationary fuel on the fire, or the fiscal fire, is what Chrystia Freeland said.
Why are you convinced that these moves will not just simply make inflation worse?
I think the most important thing is to understand that there are Canadians out there really hurting. Yes, increases in the cost of living and challenges with inflation and disrupted supply chains that are global are affecting everyone. But what we're doing with these specific measures is targeting those most vulnerable, those who are most hard hit by the increases in inflation. These are things that will make a difference in people's lives right now, but they are also sufficiently targeted that we are confident that they will not contribute to increased inflation.
So Trudeau here is saying, hey, this is different from when we were doing the CERB and the CRB and we were just giving out money to so many people. This is targeted spending. Only certain people are going to be able to receive this money, and it's the people that need it most. This is what he is claiming here. Again, if you haven't watched that previous video on the channel, you'll want to check that out to see if you actually qualify for these additional supports. But the new Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, says, hey, there is still a chance that this spending could make things worse and cause more inflation and a higher cost of living. And he says, why should we risk it in handing out this money when even the money that we're giving doesn't stretch very far in today's economy?
He says he's going to give people $500 to help with the rent. Well, that works out to $40 a month. In Toronto, that will not even buy you 1 day's rent for your $2,300 a month average rental cost for your apartment. We need to actually counter the inflation, the just inflation that this government has caused, rather than trying to spend more money to make the problem worse.
How is it not fair game for the federal government to spend taxpayers' money on helping low-income people today, this minute, afford some of the essentials of everyday life, but on les reins as well, please, Mr. Poilievre?
All of that is fine. The problem is that the money will be vaporized by inflation. As I said earlier, $500 in housing assistance for an entire year, when the average rent is over $2,000 in many of our big cities per month, that money will go up in smoke for the average family. What we need are more apartments for people to live in, more houses for them to buy. and lower taxes so that their paychecks go further.
So Polyev seems to think that it might not make sense to give out this money directly to individuals right now because the money won't stretch all that far. And he's also very quick to point out that the government's very real spending has caused inflation to go up over the past year, but he doesn't talk about the other side of inflation because the money printing from the central banks and the spending of the government is certainly causing inflation, but it's not the whole picture, right? We also have other sort of global forces that are causing inflation as well. We have the war in Ukraine that is causing an energy shortage, as well as China's zero COVID policy that's sort of blocking up supply chains. So even outside of the sort of national picture of inflation, there are things that are outside of the control, but he seems to think that by focusing on attacking the root issues of inflation nationally, we can actually make things better for Canadians. This two-sided inflation issue is also why some people are arguing that just raising interest rates like the Bank of Canada is doing to lower demand for goods in the economy, well, that might not be enough because it's a global issue. This is what Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, the leader of the NDP, is saying currently. He's saying, hey, raising interest rates is actually making it harder for people to live. So in this clip, he'll talk a little bit about that, and then he'll get to announcing when people might actually see these checks hitting their accounts, but we'll get into that in a moment.
The cost of everything is going up. And on top of that, interest rates are going up. The Bank of Canada to increase interest rates, that's just going to make life even harder for people. So we've been calling on this government, Justin Trudeau, to do something to help people out in this time. And the response from the Liberal government, from Justin Trudeau, has been, it's not our fault, or it's worse in other countries. Neither of those responses helps a family that is hurting right now because the cost of living is going up. None of those responses make it easier for someone who's feeling squeezed with inflation. So we fought hard and have been demanding since the spring that the Liberal government step up and give people some respect, the dignity to be able to afford their own groceries. And we have won. We have forced this government to deliver three things.
So Singh and the New Democratic Party are taking credit for this plan that we've just seen come out of the Liberals, saying if it weren't for us, the Liberals wouldn't be doing anything. They'd just be saying, oh, inflation is a global issue and there's not much that we can do about it. But you might remember that Jagmeet Singh of the NDP and Justin Trudeau of the Liberal Party have a handshake agreement, actually an agreement that's written, saying that they have to do certain things in order to receive the NDP's support in the House of Commons. This is super important for the Liberals because if the NDP don't support them when they put forward the legislation and the bill to actually make this happen, well, that could lead to an election, which is something the Liberals certainly do not want. So they made this agreement to make sure there's no election until 2025. So Jagmeet Singh here is likely very rightly saying, hey, if it weren't for us putting pressure on the government in this way, well, we likely wouldn't have seen this happen. But at the very same time, Pierre Poilievre, the new leader of the Conservatives, seems to think that his landslide victory in winning that role as Conservative leader is the real thing that made Justin Trudeau have such a quick response.
I thought Justin Trudeau might have learned the lesson from the fact that I won the leadership. He suddenly took an interest in inflation. After 2 years of my warning him that his inflationary money printing deficits would cause this problem, he finally admitted that there is a problem. And he announced he would hold a press conference today, one day after I issued a challenge to him.
And he's right, saying for a long time, Justin Trudeau's government wasn't too concerned about inflation, saying it was a global phenomenon. It's something that's been happening around the world, and it's not as bad in Canada as it is in other countries. This is exactly what we just heard Jagmeet Singh complaining about in his clip. But now the question comes up, when will I actually be getting this money if this plan goes through? And for that, we need to turn to the calendar, but not just the normal calendar, the House of Commons sitting calendar. So you'll see here July and August, the parliamentarians have been on their summer break in their various different provinces that they are have jurisdiction over. But now they're coming back here, and the first day is this Friday that they're going to be sitting in the House of Commons. You can see that right there on the 15th. Let me zoom in a bit. Likely, and Justin Trudeau says that we're actually going to be seeing this legislation very quickly once they start. We could see it introduced on this Thursday, actually, or maybe we'll see it at the beginning of this week. Now, likely it will take the entirety of the week to pass this, but like I said, because Trudeau and Singh have this agreement, they can essentially push this to a vote very quickly, and as a result, Jagmeet Singh will vote alongside the Liberals to get this plan passed, because that's part of their agreement. Then it'll have to go through all the various stages of legislation, which I'll keep you posted about if you subscribe to this channel, let you know how close we are to actually seeing this bill get passed. But now, if we do see this bill get passed, when will we see checks hitting accounts? Now, for the GST/HST rebate doubling, again, we talked about this in the previous video, once this is passed, we could see it retroactively applied to even this month, but it is only going to last for 6 months. So either starting now, if they choose to do it retroactively, or starting once the bill is passed, we'll have 6 months with doubled GST, HST tax rebates. A lot of people get that direct deposit into their account, or they get a check in the mail from the government that would be doubled. The Canada Housing Benefit is a little harder to predict because it's different province to province, so that's a little bit more challenging to predict. But Jagmeet Singh actually revealed when he believes we'll actually start to see the dental checks, the extra money for dental care for children 12 and under, when we'll actually see those hitting people's accounts.
I'll tell you that the first check will get to families, so a family can go out and get the care that they need. And if they apply, they'll be able to get the check basically at the end of the year or early in January next year. So they'll be able to get that funds for the first check, and then the second check will follow up before the end of 2023. So by the end of 2023, families that need to get their kids looked after will be able to get, for one child, the full amount of $1,300 before the end of 2023, staggered with the first check coming, like I said, at the end of this year or the beginning of January, and the second check coming before the end of 2023.
So that is where things stand currently, and things are certainly starting to heat up when it comes to Canadian politics, as well as all of this new legislation that's going to pass. And I want to know what you think about it. Let me know down in the comments. Do you think that this is the right way to go? A lot of people certainly do need support with the rising cost of living, but do you also think that maybe Poilievre is onto something that, hey, maybe we should be focusing more on tackling the root causes of inflation? Or do you agree with Singh that we need to actually be spending more and more, and just raising interest rates like the Bank of Canada is doing isn't the solution to this inflation and cost of living crisis? Let me know down in the comments what you think. I read every single one and try to reply to as many as I possibly can. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there's about 40% of people who watch these videos that aren't yet subscribed, and it definitely helps spread these videos to more people's feeds here on YouTube. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.